systems and adverse effects of that. And this is when we talked about, excuse me, when we talked about light pollution. You know, human beings had been living on this earth for, I don't know how long, hundreds of thousands of years. In the beginning, maybe it's not exactly our own species, but they lived for so many years until Thomas Edison and Tesla invented the system that we could turn on the light anytime in our house or whatever. So that developed into a huge amount of lights that exist on the entire globe, and that caused light pollution and disrupted ecosystems and causing some adverse effects. So that's from the light pollution last time. To talk about the ecosystem, we need to know what is ecology. I remember when I came to America for the first time in 1968, and I went to school and heard about this word ecology because there are many Chinese students taking biology classes. And my roommate was one of them. She was the third year Taida student, and her whole family went to America, and she became my roommate. And she was a medical school student in Taiwan, but when she got to United States, she studied biology. And every night when she studies, she would talk to me about her classwork. And that's how I got exposed to this word ecology, which I never heard of before 1969. That is, we all know biology. That is a study of living things like plants and animals and all things in between, like or virus and so on and so forth. But ecology is a study of the greater things in biology. It doesn't study this flower or that insect or something, but it talks about the entire environment, maybe locally in your garden or globally the entire earth. How these animals and the plants and all the living creatures live together, they affect each other, and the meaning and the results of all these things. So it addresses the full scale of life, from tiny bacteria to processes that span the entire planet. Ecologists, 就是 the people who studies ecology, are called ecologists. They study many diverse and complex relationships among species. So they study about, for example, this corner of the ocean, they would study shellfish and starfish and lots of different things, seaweed and so on. They are diverse, which means there are many of them, each of them very different from another, and complex. So it's not that you have an aquarium in your home and you have a few goldfish. So that's a very small thing to consider. But when you go to the beach, there are so many different living creatures and the system is very complex. So this study is very interesting. And what are the elements in it that would affect the situation and would be interesting to study? One is predation, which means some animals are stronger than others and they would catch others and kill. For example, a lion is a predator or predator. Yeah, I guess that you can say tur or tor. So that's a very interesting thing, because a lion would kill a zebra or kill a giraffe, and there will be one less of that thing. But if the lion turns around and kills something else, then it affects a different kind of animal. And all these animals, after they were killed and the lion or tiger went away from feasting on that animal, there will be vultures and the crows and the hyena and all kinds of other animals who are scavengers. They would come around and eat what's left over. And after that, you have ants or other even tinier animals. So there's a big chain, a food chain, so with the predator on the top and all these little other animals underneath. And then there are plants that absorb the nutrients from the soil. So all these things together, they affect each other. Another topic is pollination, which is you have some flowers, especially when you planted an orchard or a vegetable garden, you need bees and hummingbee and the other animals to pollinate the flowers. We all know that right now in the world, there's a problem with bees dying off. And when they die off, there's just millions of them losing lives every year. That greatly affects the production of the farmer's production. For example, zucchini, if you don't have bees to pollinate the flowers, then you don't get the zucchini. So it's a crisis in the farming industry. These are just two of the interesting topics in ecology. And the diversity of life is organized into different habitats, from terrestrial to aquatic ecosystems. So there are many kinds of ecosystems. Here are just two of them. The one on the left is at the bottom of the sea. You see this big blue starfish, 一个海星 with lots of coral. 就是 how do you call coral?
珊瑚.
Yeah, 珊瑚. So you have all kinds of 珊瑚. Some are more common shapes, and some are like a brain's 珊瑚 would be shaped like a human's brain. I've seen those when you go not scuba diving, but 浮潜, snorkeling. Okay, when you go snorkeling, you could see. Yeah, I did see brain coral and all these different things, and of course, they also interact with fish and the shark and the whale or so on and so forth. So that is an ecosystem that we usually are not involved with because we're on land. While on the right-hand side, this picture is right here from our Olympic Peninsula in Washington State. And you see evergreen trees or deciduous trees, which is the 落叶树, deciduous trees or evergreen trees, which never shed their leaves. And you will see grass, and you will see bugs and dead trees and moss. All these things form a different ecosystem. These are just two of them. And an ecosystem is a community of living organisms. 就是一个 community, I guess everyone knows the word community. It consists of many, many different living things, and together with the non-living things like the rocks or river and things like that, all together they interact as a system. That's called an ecosystem. And this is not a dead thing. You don't look at this and that's it forever. No, it's living every second. It's changing. When the sun shines on it, the plants would do photosynthesis, which is a photo 就是光哈 synthesis 就是合成哈 so this is 光合作用 you may not see it when you look into your garden, but every second when there's light, all the plants are working very hard to create new things. Maybe not right now, but in the spring and summer, they're just working very hard and they become bigger and bigger because they are growing. So there are more parts in their bodies, and animals also play a very important role because they would eat these plants or they would walk away and die somewhere else. For example, our salmon fish, once I went along in Canada on a salmon fish trip, when they came in the fall, maybe in October, a huge number of salmon came from the sea and swam 500 miles into way beyond. We have to go stay one night there in order to observe those salmon. They just died along the shore, by the lake and so on. And that's a huge movement by animals, bringing that amount of animal protein and land there and live there. And then all the plants and other animals could feed on those things. So this whole system is constantly changing with the plants growing and animal moving around. This is a very amazing thing that you can witness. Okay. And then, when the fish died, that maybe some other animals would come and eat it, like eagle, or eagle do eat them, bears, but they also became nutrient seeping into the forest floor. And there are microbes. Here's the word microbes. The 微生物, they would digest this leftover animal or plant parts so that they would enrich the soil, and the soil would be supplying for the trees to grow. And again, so the whole thing is a big cycle with many things, putting things into it and taking it out of there. And all this nutrient cycling is the main drive behind the ecosystem. So it's a dynamic entity. The ecosystems are dynamic entities, 就是它是很活动的这个情况哈。And sometimes there'll be a fire or an earthquake or whatever incident that would cause a disturbance. Periodic disturbances 就是说你的这个 ecosystems 里面发生了 something like what I said, fire or earthquake, that disturbs the system, and the balance that was reached before the incident would now be disturbed so that it's put out of balance. And then this whole process of recovering from it would take a long time, and eventually it will be rebalanced. So now that I look at it, I would think that's a very interesting for me to study. So if I were a 20-year-old kid, but it's a little late. The next thing I'm going to talk about is the keystone in the architecture. You look at this picture I took in 2015 in Greece. This was a Lion's Gate in Mycenae in Greece. If you have heard of Homer, 就是荷马, he wrote Iliad and the Odyssey about the war, the Trojan Wars, 特洛或者特洛伊的战争哈。In this story, there was once, yeah, it's probably 800 years BC or something like that. We don't know exactly. Some people even think it's not a real story, but it is partly a real story. I'm talking about Mycenae, where we see the palace of Agamemnon. Agamemnon was the leader of Greek states that waged the war against the Trojan people. Trojan, this is all about Greece. However, Trojan is actually a city in present-day Turkey. If you go on a tour of Turkey, many of the tour company would take you to Troy. It was buried under 7 layers of flood and silt and so on. And this German person who is called the Schliemann, he dedicated his life to find where Trojan was, and he succeeded. So I'm talking about Agamemnon, who fought, he led the Greek people to fight the Trojan people, and he won. Okay, so this is a home of Agamemnon and his father and brothers and so on and so forth. But after he won the war, he came home and he was killed in the bathtub by his wife because his wife had a new lover when he went to the war. Okay, so this is the palace of Agamemnon on the hill in Mycenae, and you could see this gateway, which is called Lion's Gate. It has 2 pillars on the sides and 1 huge horizontal stone right on top of the gate, so that other pieces of rocks would not fall into the gate. In order to make a gate, you need 2 sides and a top so that people can come in and out without having to worry that the sky would fall on them. So this is a big, big rock that's there, and it was built many hundred years before Christ. That is called Mycenae. The place is called Mycenae. If you're interested in Greek tragedies, there are many, many stories about Agamemnon and Oedipus or Oedipus Rex and so on and so forth. They were really great playwrights in those days. Compared to the Greek tragedies and the comedies, we Chinese, who never thought entertainment was anything important, we had very few stories to tell until the Indian influence came through the Silk Road in Han, in Tang, especially in Tang Dynasty. That's when we got all those influence in drama. Okay, here we're in Peru. I was in Peru in 2007, and this little town near Machu Picchu is called Ollantaytambo. And here's a gate that is called a trapezoidal gate because it is in the shape of a trapezoid. A trapezoid is not a square, not a rectangle, but it's similar to a rectangle, except that the 2 sides are not parallel, while the other 2 sides are parallel. The ground level and the top of the gate, that they are parallel, but the 2 sides are not parallel. So that's why this gate is called the Trapezoidal Gate, 梯形的. And this gate, you can see it is on this Inca trail, and it's got very big rocks to form the 2 sides, the wall. The walls, and on top there's a large stone on top, and it holds the top of the gate. This is just like the Lion's Gate with a big rock on top. So when you need a big stone on the top to form the gate, this gate cannot be too big, you know, because you cannot find a stone that big. However, this is last year I took this picture in Ethiopia. You could see that there's a gate and they put a big piece of wood on top of the gate to hold on the upper two stories. So that is a very important thing on top of the gate to hold so many things on top above this gate. Now that's in Ethiopia, in Gondar. We're in the castle of Fasilides. That is the name of the king. So then we think about Gongmen, which is called arch. The arch is a doorway or a gate that is like a half circle. How do you hold this gate up? And the key is the keystone. You put a keystone there so that the arch would stay there and not collapsing. I can show you some pictures. This red piece of rock is right there. Without it, this door would collapse. Both left and right side would come down and there will be no gate. And in the Islamic building, like a palace or a mosque, some of them were built this way. You have so many arches and each one consists of many pieces of stones, but the middle one, the last one that's put there, is called the keystone, because without this last piece, it's not going to hold together. The whole thing will break down. So that's a wonderful thing about a keystone in an arch. It is believed that it was invented or in use 6000 BC, that is 8,000 years ago, by the Sumerian people. However, there was not enough evidence or recording history to show us who or what happened at that time. So the Romans, around the time that Jesus was born, the Romans received much of the credit for perfecting the design. The Romans are great architects. They inherited a lot of wisdom and art from the Greek people. However, the architecture they left in this whole world, in a very large area of the world, from the west as England and Scotland, the Hadrian's War. That's like our Great Wall of China, all the way to Turkey, to Syria, to Iran. That's how far their empire was. And of course, south of Mediterranean in Morocco and so on, you can see Roman ruins, and north all the way to Vienna. You can see Vienna with the Roman ruins, lots of such things. Any trip to Europe would inevitably take you to some Roman ruins. They are so great, and they perfected this structure of putting a keystone in an arch. Yeah, it was done before the Romans by the Greek people, but the Romans just perfected this art. A keystone is also called a capstone. That is the stone that caps this gateway. It is a wedge shaped. So that's called wedge. Just it's a part of a circle, but it's a part, not the whole thing. So it's a wedge with two sides like this, and the circle part is there, and here is the lower end is near the center of the circle. That's called a wedge. Sometimes it's a sharp edge, the sharp angled wedge. Sometimes the sharp edge was cut off. it was at the apex of a masonry arch. A masonry is a architecture made of rocks or stones, 就是石材所做的拱门. At the apex, which means the top of it, this very last piece of stone is called the keystone. Or if it's a round-shaped thing, for example, a dome of a building, or in the basement, the entire room has a dome-shaped vaulted ceiling. Then the center at the top, the round-shaped rock is also called a keystone. Let me explain. It is like this one is a keystone, and every arch here has a keystone at the top, probably this white one, the very last piece that was put in there so that everything was fixed when this was knocked in there. That's called a capstone. And the one is here, which you cannot see very much because this is a very refined architecture of a bridge in Bosnia, Herzegovina. And it's in the town of Mostar. It's called the Old Bridge, which is in their language, Stari Most. Most is a bridge and Stari is old. And I was there in 2014. So these are the arched bridge or arches with the last piece in the middle that is the keystone or capstone. On the other hand, you can also call things like this, which is the roof of a vaulted ceiling with many ribs. Ribs 就是我们说这个肋骨哈。These are all the ribs that reaches into the center, and this small circle in the middle of all these ribs is a capstone, is a keystone, because it holds all the ribs together. And this one is also a simpler rendition of this rib vault. It has a picture of Jesus here, and these are the ribs. Yeah, you could see both kinds when you travel. And we're looking back at the second slide, which says, in both cases, it is the final piece placed during construction and locks all the stones into position. So you would build this bridge or a vault or whatever. You would lay all the stones closer and closer to the center. And as soon as you put the center piece, the final piece there, everything is locked and it's not going to fall until maybe, I don't know, haiku shilan. So that is a key final piece in the structure that locks all the others together into position. And it allows the arch or vault to bear weight. 如果是 arch, we mean that the last piece of a bridge or something on top of the gate. And if it's a vault, it is a vaulted ceiling, a rounded ceiling with all the ribs coming into the top of the ceiling. And the last round thing is what caps the keystone of the whole thing. Itself, that last piece, it does not hold a lot of stress there. It's the least piece, the piece that receives the least stress, because the entire weight of the structure was, the weight was borne by many other pieces below this keystone. So the keystone itself does not really bear a lot of the weight of this construction. However, it is the position there that caused the whole thing to come together. So it's a wonderful thing. In this case, it's the keystone in this wall or gateway. And in this case, it is all these ribs coming into the center, and this centerpiece, also called the keystone, that holds everything in place. Okay. So this is one thing, or a major thing that we talk about today. But the next one is about the Serengeti rules. We talk about keystone predators. Predators 是这个 animals that kill, they hunt and kill other animals in order to live. And there are keystone predators that they are more important than others. And I hope I gave you this. You did? Okay, that's good. So you can go there. I think when you go to PBS for the first time, you go to pbs.org, it may or may not ask you to register your name. And I had a friend who just refused to register, so she was not able to get in. They just want to track people, or maybe they later would send you advertisement. Yeah, I'm getting lots of advertisement from PBS, but you get to watch a lot of free videos that are really good quality videos. And this one is called the Serengeti Rules. And the role of keystone predators. There are a lot of words with OR at the end that we do not pronounce as predator. We would say predators. But of course, there are people who pronounce it differently. So you would find it a little strange the first time that the word like this obviously should be pronounced a predator, but most people would call it predators, and you will get used to it. In this story on PBS, which is a public broadcasting system, if you live around here, you could go to KCTS, which is our local branch of PBS, and you could watch this link. This Serengeti rules talk about the role of keystone predators. Most of them are, in fact, predators. Predators means the animal on the top of the food chain. It kills the next animal, and nobody kills the predator itself. So it is the greatest animals, for example, lions, tigers, and things like that. Okay. And their roles in this movie or in this video, it introduced you to several of them. Starfish is a predator in the tide pools. Tide pool 就是这个潮水涨上来 at the high tide of the tide, there are pools that trap water inside, and there will be animals in this pools. And when the tide goes down, the other parts of the beach would be bare without water, while the tide pool would hold some water for a while until the next tide comes up. So it's talking about starfish in tide pool in Washington State. And this teacher, the professor, was a professor at UW. And it started the entire story about the Serengeti rules that you could just watch it. Yeah, it talks about different animals, sea otters in Aleutian Islands in Alaska, and largemouth bass in Oklahoma Pond, and the leopard on a tiny island in Venezuela, leopard, and the wildebeest, which is not a predator. The first four are really predators that if you take it out, the ecosystem would collapse. Okay, so we would think oh, what if we all live happily together? If we just if we could kill all the lions and tigers, and there'll be a big happy family. However, all these big animals have their vital roles in the ecosystem. That's very important. Without them, the whole system would collapse. So I wish you would go there to watch this. There are wildebeest in Serengeti, Tanzania, and wolves in Yellowstone, and wild dog. All these are topics discussed in this. However, this is a PBS story that you have to go to PBS to watch, not on YouTube. If you go to YouTube, you will see this guy, Jean B. Carroll. He gave numerous, at least 50 lectures about the Serengeti rule. And it's very interesting. Even it's talking about the same thing. Each one is very different. And his rule is, there are 4 rules in Serengeti rules. One is the Keystone predator that existed there to hold everything together. For example, in Chinese history, there would be a dynasty, and when it collapsed, the world just go wild. It's chaos. So you need some keystone there in order to hold the rule. Okay, I'm not advocating those bad rulers, but that's their role is to hold it all together. And once it's gone, the world will go into chaos. And sometimes really bad things happen. And the second rule is called the Trophic Cascade, which I have never heard of this word before, but it is the system about, for example, you have a monkey in the system, and there are animals above it that kills the monkey, and there are animals or plants underneath the food that the monkey would eat. So there is such a bottom up and top down system. The trophic level of an organism is the position it occupies in the food web. We're all related one way or another. Like I was thinking about the Disney movie. What's her name? The Indian girl. Anyway, this Indian girl who actually married John something and moved to London to live.
Pocahontas.
Yes, Pocahontas. Yes, Pocahontas. In her famous song, she says, "We're all connected to each other in the circle, in the chain." So you cannot say lions are bad and let's kill all the lions. They have their place in the ecosystem that hold on the entire system together. Without the lions, it would collapse. Okay. Food regulation and nature is resilient. These are the Serengeti rules, and I watched quite a few of them by Jean Carroll, and he talked about all these things. You can go to YouTube to watch. These are very interesting topics. Create adverse effects. Okay. So we have adverse, the word adverse. Ad is added in front. We call it prefix. Something, a prefix is added in front of words. And this term AD is often added to other words to turn. So adverse means turned against. Verse with added in front. And add would, I would talk about it right after this, but right here, ad means to or towards. So it is added here means a verse is bad, and the adverse is meaning creating a bad effect. Huh? I have a ton of these words. You have AD in front of it. You have adaptable, addict, adequate, adhere, adjacent, admire, advance, advantage. If you want to take a picture of a slide with so many words, you can just push the print screen button. In some keyboard, you had to press something else, like shift, but sometimes it's by itself. Anyway, all these words, many of them we see all the time, like advantage or advertise, advocate, they all have this ad prefix. Prefix 就是加在前面. They have this in order to mean to or towards. Okay, so these are very useful. Administer or advise, advocate. And here we have a gravitationally bound system. This is a big system you're looking at, which I used the same picture last time. This is a big galaxy. Galaxy 是星河哈. We call it a river of lots of stars. And in this case, it is a rounded shape instead of our Milky Way, which is river shaped. And in this system, there are millions and millions or billions of millions of stars in this whole system. And for example, our system, which is the Milky Way system, we would have many stars, and the sun is just one of them. This is not our system. Our system is a Milky Way, so it's not a circular shaped galaxy. So you can imagine the people who found out this in history a long time ago. It's just all inspiring to think that we are just a tiny thing in the millions and millions of stars. We're not on one of them. We are on one of its planet. Okay, so this is a mind-boggling. And Newton was the person who discovered gravitation or gravity. That means 万有引力. All these stars and the planets and so on and so forth, they form a system that's bound by their mutual attraction. This attraction is called gravity. 万有引力. That is amazing. I think we first learned about that when we were in elementary school, and it's really hard to imagine what it is. And Einstein's relativity. Why did I put it here? It's because when we see a light coming here, and it would be attracted by this huge gravitational force, and it would bend. A huge solid thing like a galaxy would bend the light. 这个光线这样经过的时候, because of the huge weight exerting gravitational force would bend this light. So it was predicted by Einstein. And eventually scientists were able to prove that he was right when there was a solar eclipse, 就是日食, one day after Einstein died. They observed the bending of the light when there was a solar eclipse 就是日食的意思, when the solar light was covered by the moon, when we have the moon moving between the globe, the earth and the sun, it would block the light from the sun, and you will be able to see what's around the sun because the light was blocked. And some scientists were able to observe light passing by the sun, and the light was bent. We would think that stars and planets would be attracted by a huge source of weight, but even light was bent by huge stars. So this is a great discovery that proved Einstein's relativity was correct. That is beyond me. I can only tell you this, but I don't really know what's going on. Our next word is astrology, which is in the ancient times, people love to watch the stars, and they developed theories, and they discovered the stars, and they named the stars, and they developed some kind of fortune telling theories. They could tell your fortune by looking at the star. In the West, they would say what time you were born, then your life was decided by that phase of where the earth was and what stars were in the sky. So 我们叫它做占星术, just to tell a person's fortune. In the West is about the birthday. If you are born on a certain day, then your life was determined by the phase of the stars. But in our culture, it's not necessarily the fortune of a person based on the birthday. But we also have astrology. For example, if you read 三国演义, the romance of the three kingdoms, then you would know that they could predict things by observing the stars. And maybe Zhuge Liang would look at the star and saw some, I don't know, a meteor, or how do you call that? Like the Halley 彗星, Halley, how do you call that? 彗星? Comet, yes, okay. 彗星is it goes like this. So once in 76 years, you would see it, Halley's Comet once. However, a meteor is different. On the night, you could see meteor shower. Hundreds of meteors would just fall from the sky into the earth. These are two different things, because the comet would come, and many years later it would come back. It doesn't perish by crashing into the earth. So I was talking about Zhuge Liang, who observed some kind of astronomical event, and he could predict something happened in the world and so on and so forth. But of course, I don't know anything about that. But both in the West and in the East, they have different theories and different reason to explain things. They all turn out to be wrong once you know that these were really not what they thought it was. Okay, so it becomes a pseudo science, which is, it seems like a science, but is a false science. That is by observing the celestial objects. Celestial is things in the sky. It's an adjective. A celestial object means 天上的物件, 天体. The astrologers would observe what's in the sky and tell you fortunes, either about your dynasty, about your personal life, or whatever. These are all proved to be fake, because once we knew that there are all these stars and planets in the sky that had nothing to do with our lives. Okay. Astrology, second millennium, 2000 years before Christ. And it has roots in calendrical system used to predict seasonal shifts. Of course, you can predict seasonal shifts because the earth rotates around the sun year after year. So every year you have 4 seasons and all these things. That is predictable. However, you cannot predict one person's life based on a certain star very, very far away. That is just fake news, okay? So there, people like Hindus and Chinese and Maya in South America, they probably say Maya, and in English you may see Maya, I don't know. Anyway, all these older culture, in this case, Maya was not too old, but compared to us, their history is later than Jesus Christ. But these are old cultures developing a very elaborate system to predict and explain this things happening on Earth based on the movement of the stars and what maybe the eclipse, which is 日食, 月食, and things like that. However, ours is different from the Western astrology, which can be traced into 19th to 17th century before Christ in Mesopotamia. Mesopotamia 是两河流域, Meso is between, Potamia is rivers. So between 2 rivers, it's Euphrates and what's the name of the other? Tigris. Okay, Tigris and Euphrates, the 2 rivers in probably in Iraq. Yeah, in 伊拉克的两河流域. At that time, the Western astrology developed and it thrived later in Europe. However, in India and in China, we had different astrology, totally different. And Maya would be South America. So all the older ancient people, they developed theories about the relationship between stars and human beings, which turned out to be all wrong because they had nothing to do with us. They're so far away. Even if you start to walk there, it'll take, I don't know, 1 million generations of people to finally reach that star. So it has nothing to do with our lives. But we have this system of horoscopes that was developed based on how the stars were moving and things like that, which really I don't give a damn about it, but many people still follow that. Newspapers still list today's horoscope and so on. Okay. At the end, so at the end of 19th century, we had Galileo, who invented the telescope. So he, in his own lifetime, he was able to see the planets, the stars, and even the how do you call that, satellites around the planets and around others, whatever. So that's I think he was probably in the 15th century, but I'm not sure. Anyway, he invented that telescope, and as a result, in the 19th century, scientists were able to successfully challenge astrology and tell all these astrologers that their theories are all fictitious. you cannot trust them at all. There's no scientific validity or explanatory power 所以没有科学的根据跟力量 OK Astrology 就 no longer has any theoretical standing or academic standing. So in the old days, astrologers are revered scientists, but now they're just fake news. Here we have this, you can see horoscope, 12 signs of the zodiac. Zodiac is 黄道 in our language. 黄道有12宫 by coincidence, we also divided 黄道 into 12 entities. So 黄道 is you have the sun here, and you have the earth circling around it. It's all on a plane, okay? We don't go this way and that way and that way. No, we don't do that. Our earth goes around the sun this way, always in a very flat surface. And so in the east and the west, we both decided that the route that the earth travels around the sun, we should divide it into sections so that we can predict the weather and our fortunes according to this 12 different things. But this is a west, they have a zodiac with 12 animals. You see all those animals around the circle. So for a long time, people in the West, they would look at their birthday and decide they were born under which sign. For example, Cancer is the crab. And I think I'm one of, I think I'm here, okay. I think so, okay. But these are Pisces and Scorpio and so on and so forth. These are not our zodiac signs. Our Chinese zodiac signs were based on the 12 animal cycle of the year. So it has nothing to do with where the earth is around the sun. We have this 12-year cycle that we call zodiac, but it's different from theirs, okay? And this is Aries is when I was born under Aries, and Taurus and so on and so forth. If you're interested, you can easily find what these signs are and which one you belong to. And in order to tell your fortune, the fortune teller would look at your birthday and the horoscope, what star and what planet was located at what position when you were born, and so on. This called going through. And these are the 12 animals in the, what was the word? In the horoscope, okay. So for some reason, Aries, which was the sign under which I was born in April, it always came up first according to this chart. So you have Aries, Taurus, Gemini, Cancer, Leo, Virgo, Libra, Scorpio, Sagittarius, Capricorn, Aquarius. This is a little funny. It's 我们叫的水瓶座 and the Pisces. These are the symbols that astrologers and the astronomers decided to use when they mention a certain sign in the zodiac. And these are the sign of the sun and moon and the other planets and even some of the satellite around the planet, like this Chiron. And the naming of them, they have total different tradition than our name. We would have 金木水火土星, but they would have two different names. And eventually the whole world have consolidated totally commonly agreed names for all the stars and planets and all these, those, how do you call that? 12 signs, okay, 12 signs of the zodiac, okay. I'm starting to have some of these graphic tricks, showy graphics that I adopt because my computer is suggesting me. My PowerPoints used to be really, really, 我们叫的阳春, really plain looking, just like this. But ever since last time my computer went dead and I resurrected by accident, I had to reinstall everything. And I have a newer version of my old PowerPoint software. And now every time I do a picture like this, in the beginning, I only had 2 of these charts, and the computer would suggest me, how about this? Oh, sure, it looked much better. So I'm starting to have some fancy looks in my slides, which I was not able to, thanks to my crash of my computer. It's still the same software. I didn't pay a dime for the new one. I just installed it using my own account at Microsoft, but it's a new one. Didn't cost me anything, and it could give me things like this to look at. Maybe you find it interesting. And the horoscope, we're not going into detail about this. There's a lot about this that are no longer interesting to me, because anything that's fake, I don't want to learn too much about it, okay? And here's Nancy Reagan, who's really a great adherent of this kind of knowledge. She believes in horoscope, and every morning when Ronald Reagan woke up in the White House, she would tell him which way to go, because if you make a wrong turn, it's going to be disastrous. So for quite a few years, Ronald Reagan had to listen to his wife after he was John Hinckley attempted assassination of Ronald Reagan. Nancy Reagan took over this daily schedule of Ronald Reagan's daily schedule, okay? So he had to get an okay from his wife about which direction he should turn in the morning, and so on and so forth, until how many years later? Yeah, I guess 2 years later, the chief of staff, Donald Reagan, decided that the president should not listen to his wife. And even though he was ousted, he still made sure to kick out this fortune teller, whose name is Joan Quigley. Okay, that's a very interesting side chapter of the White House. The next 3 words are simple. One is stress. A person feels the stress when there's a lot of things on his mind or in his schedule, things like that. And it would cause him to have anxiety. And some of those people would experience depression. These are all related to a person's psychological well-being. This is a gala, which is a festival. It's just a festival. Starting in 18th century, we use the word gala, which was used to describe festive dress. Then we call such a gathering a gala. Gala, yes, I think in English you would call gala. And I'm not going to go into this. It is just many elements of musical notations. If you're interested, you can go into those things. you can go online to look for these words and to learn more about things that we probably only knew in Chinese. And it's good to learn some new words by looking into the English side of it. And then there are three other words. One is inscription, that is the carved lettering or words or sentences in the rock. For example, the Rosetta Stone would have three kinds of languages carved inscription on a piece of rock that enabled the ancient language scholar Chamboyan to decipher these words. And the sinister is an adjective, and the negative is also an adjective. And then we come to the word pigment. Pigment is the coloring, but there are mainly two types of coloring. One is pigment, which usually comes from rocks. You find different colored rocks and you grind it up so you can use it to color your painting. Another kind would be dyes here, D-Y-E, dyes. Dyes are different from pigment. Pigment is just ground up powder and they don't usually dissolve in water. However, dyes are usually from animals and plants, and they would dissolve. They're typically soluble, so they dissolve in water and make the water become colorful. So there are two major kinds of artistic tools that you can use to make your painting more colorful. Generally, okay, so this is pigment. Yeah, we see the word dye probably more often. You actually, when you go into different countries, they will show you their traditional dyes, but pigments you do not come across so often as dyes. For example, there's a kind of plant that would dye your dress into blue color, and if you would put some wax on it, and you would tie-dye it, a fabric, by tying the fabric into a knot and then dip in and then take out, and then the places you put wax on before would not absorb the coloring, so you had a pattern on it like a tie-dye. But there are also other ways to do it. Well, I'm not going to go into detail, but these pigment and dyes are two major kinds of coloring in the ancient times. They are natural. So the ancient people used them because they were there already. However, people later invented artificial dyes. That's a different story. And this is just three words you need to learn. One is primary, secondary, and tertiary. And at first, I only knew schools. You have primary school from first grade to sixth, and secondary school from 7th to 12th, and anything above that in college level would be the third grade of education. But then primary is also used for the first level of election. You have primaries so that you can select someone to compete in the final election. And here we have tertiary, second. Okay. The word Roman éclat is a French word. Roman is a novel. For example, I just mentioned the Romance of the Three Kingdoms, 就是三国演义 Roman 就是小说的意思。A clef is a novel with a key, a clef. Actually, you don't really pronounce this F, clef, just a key. Roman novel with a key means that the novel and real life is related. They are closely related with a key. If you find the key, you can translate one into another. So we were talking about a novel written by a Newsweek reporter about Clinton and his wife and so on during their second election campaign. And of course, he named all the people with other names, but if you know it's about Clinton, you could figure out who is Clinton and who is what. When the story was out, the author was anonymous, so nobody knew who he was. It turns out to be, I don't know, Joe Kai or something. And so if you have the key, you can unlock the mystery and know what this novel was actually about. So it can also be not just a fiction, but it can be a movie, okay? A film, a clef, it would be a movie that was actually about real people, but the true identities are not disclosed. Here we have this clef that we learned last time. We have treble, alto, tenor, and bass. Usually we have this. This is called the treble clef, and this is called the bass clef. 高音谱记号跟低音谱记号, these are called clef. So in this case, it is the key. It means the key. And this one I'm going to not going into great detail about this cognitive behavioral therapy. This is a kind of a psychiatrist, psychosocial intervention, because people would have delusions, or they would have hallucination and so on, or they have just some suppressed memory in their life. And the role of a psychiatrist is to discover these hidden things and make them disappear, to twist it back so that straighten it so that the people could recognize that their thinking was wrong. This kind of therapy is called cognitive behavioral therapy, and it is relatively new when you compare it with Sigmund Freud's. His psychoanalysis is basically based on people have memory of things they did not want to remember, so they suppress it. So he would want the psychologist or psychiatrist to sit next to a bed with the patient lying in bed and telling the story to the psychiatrist. And this is called a psychoanalysis. And by doing that, he would try to cure a person of his very twisted ideas and beliefs. So that's called the 心理医师的治疗. That was a mainstream at the end of 19th century, but into 20th century, we had other ways to cure people of their problems. This cognitive behavioral therapy was one of them. And this comes from the word cognitive, which is pretty abstract. If we say this is a tomato and this is a cup, that's pretty obvious. But cognitive is a kind of abstract. Your idea of recognizing things and thinking through logic in your mind. This is called the cognitive function. And the AI, which is artificial intelligence, it is the science to teach computers to try to analyze things based on the way people analyze things. So AI is artificial intelligence that would mimic, 就是 to follow, to mimic, to 模仿 mimic, to mimic human 的 cognitive function. 人是怎么样想一件事情 from the beginning to the end, people thinking, going this way and that way and coming to the answer. And AI would teach a computer to follow these rules. How, when you see two things, how do you decide which way to go, and so on. So that logic built in the computer would help the computer to be able to recognize the reasoning of things. This is not using any emotion. If it's a human would have cognitive function and emotional response to different things, but the computer does not have emotion at the time. Maybe they're trying to do that, but it's very hard to teach a computer to be emotional. So cognitive is equivalent to intellectual. Just use your reasons to decide things. That is called cognitive. There's a picture of that. You have behavior that was affected by your thinking and your feeling. They are two different things. That human is able to have both the thinking and the feeling, but a computer most of the time only can think but cannot feel. The next few words are lexical. This come from the word lexicon, C-O-N, that means 字典. And lexicographer is 字典学家. And we learned that brothers Grimm, 格林兄弟, they study ancient words and the lexicons, and they are lexicographers. Okay, 叫做字典学家. It is a very important study, especially a few centuries before us. Right now, we pretty much figured out how words came about and where it's going. But of course, words are always changing all the time. Yeah, there are many words. If you go to China, you would not be able to understand what it means in a certain newspaper, because words are changing very fast. Every day in our life, people are trying to change the use of the words. Oral is a code instead of written. So you have history that's oral history or written history. And the sanitize is to make it clean. We have sanitizer when you, for example, you go to a supermarket right now, they would have a hand sanitizer right there in front of the store so you can clean your hand. And when you come out, you can do it again. However, when we learned this word last week, we learned it when we talked about the brothers Grimm, because their stories were so bloody that people say children should not read those bloody stories. So they try to sanitize it. So in this case, they did not use any chemical to sanitize it. They just changed the word so that it's not so violent. And here's trauma and the traumatic. So you would have a traumatic experience if you went through a mass killing. For example, some gunman came in and killed a lot of people in the shopping mall, and other people who were not killed or injured, they would still have a traumatic experience because it hurted them psychologically so much. A real trauma is a 伤口. You have a skin that's broken, and that's a trauma something. And if you go to the hospital, they have a trauma center where, for example, our Harbor View is the largest trauma center hospital we have in the area. So if you have serious car accident or mountain accident or whatever, people would be airlifted to Harbor View in order to be treated because they have a better trauma center. And right recently we heard about PTSD a lot of times because of the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq. Soldiers who went to the war would come back with PTSD, which is post-traumatic stress disorder. So after they were injured, but they did not die, or they witnessed a huge disastrous happening, they would psychologically be so traumatized that they had a stress disorder. Stress 就是很大的压力产生，让他得到这个病症。Disorder is an order that is wrong. Wrong order means a disorder. PTSD is a mental disorder that can develop after a person was exposed to a traumatic event, such as sexual assault or warfare or traffic collisions or child abuse or other threats on the person's life. So this is called PTSD. And the symptoms 就是你得了这个病的真相 what happens, what can be seen after a person experience this kind of disorder. You could see that here, disturbing thoughts, feelings, or dreams related to the events, mental or physical distress, towards trauma-related cues, alteration. All these things happen because of something catastrophic happened to you. Your mind could not process. Actually, not all the people who experience the same thing would have some kind of PTSD, but some would definitely have that. They could not process it in a regular manner, and they became altered in a certain way. And a person with PTSD is at a higher risk of suicide. So in the past, we were not aware of such a thing. After Second World War, lots of soldiers came home and they had this thing with them, and we did not know that. We just released them into the civilian world, and some of them could not adjust to regular life because they were trained to just shoot and kill lots of people. And they also saw a lot of people being shot dead or bombed dead, but they just came home to a peaceful, happy world, and they were expected to recover, bounce back right away. And some of them just could not do it. So this is called PTSD. Right now, we really turned the tide, and we started to recognize that we have this obligation to help the soldiers who came back to readjust to life in regular life. Here we have adhere, which is to stick to something, 坚持固守或者附着. And here AD is a prefix we just learned somewhere in the beginning when we learned about adverse. Here we have adhere, that is a prefix that would be attached in the front to mean something. And here we have adhesive, which is like a glue or paste. Paste would be 浆糊, Glue is also 浆糊, but it could be 胶水, Adhesive is something that sticks to something else, or it helps other things to stick to something else. That's called adhesive. And now we have delusion and hallucination. After I checked it, I could tell you that hallucination is more about your senses. A person has 5 senses, 5种感觉. What are the 5 senses? You have eye, nose, tongue, ear, and touch. These are your five senses, and you have different organs for these five senses, like ears for auditory, 就是听觉, and eyes for visual, that is your 视觉, and nose, this word is less often used, it's olfactory, 这个叫做嗅觉, tactile, oh, okay, tactile is a 触觉. So what is gustatory? We have 听视嗅
味觉
okay 味觉 so you have taste, gust, okay, that's right, yeah, thank you. And so when you have hallucination, you would have one of these five or one or more of these five senses that were not true. You would smell something or you see something or whatever, and it was not there. That's called hallucination. It's called the 幻觉, So it doesn't exist, but somehow you feel you could feel it. Okay, well, delusion is different. Delusion is not because you feel you touch something or smell something, but because your mind, you created something in your head that is not true, but you did not know. That's called delusion. That's 妄想. 幻觉是 something that you really felt but was not there. But delusion is in your mind. Okay, it's a false belief that is resistant to confrontation. Even other people tells you, no, that's not true. Trump did not win the election, but some people just could not get out of it. They have this delusion, of course, fed by the president himself, that they could not let go. So this kind of a psychological disorder. The hallucination is about your five different senses. Sensory is from sense. So you have sensory that make the word sense into an adjective, 变成形容词, sensory experience that occurs in the absence of an external stimulus. 事实上, it did not exist. That's why it's called absence. It does not exist, but you feel, you could smell it, you could touch it, but it was not true. So this is called the hallucination. Here is a slide about all the words related to the election that if you're interested in this, you can try to go over them yourself. Many of them is about how Trump incited the people, instigated the mob, and caused an insurrection. And it is actually a sedition, and it's a treason. But he is no longer the president now. Let's just wait and see what happens to him, because he really did something that was terribly wrong. And then we go to the next slide, which has incapacitate. That is when we had 25th Amendment of the Constitution, we dealt with the situation when the president was incapacitated. That was because President Kennedy was assassinated and he died. And we started to imagine, what if he did not die? What if he was only incapacitated? And how would we handle the situation? That's why we wrote the 25th Amendment and had it passed or ratified by the Congress. And so it became the 25th Amendment to deal with the incapacitation. This thing did happen. For example, Lincoln was assassinated. In fact, every 20 years, somebody was assassinated. I mean, some president was either assassinated or died of natural cause. And one of them was Wilson. He did not die right away, but he became incapacitated. So his wife took over, not not because the Congress decided his wife should be the vice president, but she just went ahead and did a lot of the things by herself. And that was not good. So after Kennedy was assassinated, we had this amendment. A tiebreaker is about this Senate had a 50-50 situation with half of them belonging to one party and half of them belonging to another. And the Kamala Harris came in as the president of the Senate, and she would cast the tiebreaker vote. So from now on, if the two sides insist on voting strictly for their own party, then we need Kamala Harris to come over to cast the tiebreaker ballot in order to break the tie. Okay. So the vice president used to be a ceremonial, played a ceremonial role in the Senate as a president of the Senate, because they would do their business every time they had, they don't hardly ever have a tie. But nowadays we had 50-50 tie between the two parties. This Kamala Harris would not always be a ceremonial role, play a ceremonial role in all the votings. And also we talk about Mike Pence. He would would have presided. He did actually. He presided over the Senate, and ceremonially he sanctioned that we voted, the Electoral College voted for Biden. However, Trump would not let him do this ceremonial role, because this role is actually, he has no right to change it. His role is totally ceremonial. Okay. The last word is uncontested. That is when you have a majority, Senate majority leader, whatever he says becomes the rule, and nobody could contest him. So he has this uncontested role as the majority leader, which Mitch McConnell behaved in this role. He took this role and rammed through the Senate many things that nobody could tell him not to do it. That is his role. That is uncontested. That's why we had so many Supreme Court judges put into place during Trump's tenure, Trump's tenure as the president, because Mitch McConnell caused Merrick Garland not to be able to pass the Senate ratification. And he also rammed through with this Amy something. What's her name? The new Supreme Court judge, only a few days before the change of President, Mitch McConnell was able to ram it through and got the last Supreme Court judge approved by the Senate. Okay. And then we go to this song, which is Molly Malone, and she was a fishmonger. She sells fish. A monger is a seller, and the fishmonger is a vendor of fish. We are more acquainted with the word vendor, but monger is a very common word too. You have ironmonger if you sell iron. You have apple monger. You have horse monger, and pelt monger, which would be a person who sells pelt. Pelt is the skin of an animal. Usually it's not the whole sheet like a cow or cattle's skin, or goat or a pig, but smaller like a mink or a raccoon. If you sell the skin with or without hair, that would be a pelt. Then for a person who's promoting something undesirable, we would say this person is a something monger. We will have a rumor monger who was spreading rumor. 散布谣言的人, or warmonger who's promoting, oh, we should go to war. Oh, this Iraq was having a artificial chemical weapon and so on and so forth. We need to go to war, but they actually don't have any chemical weapon. And the scaremonger is they make people fear about things so that they could take advantage of the situation. Hype monger would be mostly for commercial reason. They want to sell some things. They say, oh, this product is so good, but it's a lie. So these are words with monger after it. And the last word is anthology, which is a book collection of items in this book. Either they are all poetry or all short story or all by one author, or but they would have different authors in some other cases. So that's called an anthology. And most famous in our case would be 全唐诗. And of course, you could have other thing like 昭明文选, or yeah, throughout history, Chinese did to put a lot of efforts into making anthologies. And of course, other countries. So did other countries. So now we're going to do this song, which is John Denver's, how do I, oh, okay. I would, I'm sorry, stop share and go to share screen and choose this song. And it's called Country Road, Take Me Home. So that you were listening to John Denver. And of all these words, there's moonshine, which is not our regular words. It is illegal alcoholic drink making at home. That when the law of the land was prohibition, you could not make any kind of fermented drinks during the 1920s. That's why you are doing it illegally at home, and it's called moonshine. And we learned about that pretty early on, maybe in April. Here's a picture of John Denver, and he had a not very long life because he died of an accident while driving flying his new airplane. It fell off the sky in 1997. He's a very kind and generous person. He doesn't have a very fancy voice, but very kind. You can hear that he's good natured. Unlike some famous singers like Frank Sinatra, who would have a girlfriend every day, John Denver just makes you feel he's a good person. He's a singer, songwriter, record producer, actor, activist, and humanitarian, whose greatest commercial success was as a solo singer. So he was singing all by himself, so it's called a solo singer. However, we did hear some other girls' voices accompanying the song we just heard. This song became the actually it became the West Virginia's state song. Rocky Mountain High was one of his other songs that became a Colorado state song. So I would imagine one person having two songs become state song would be a very rare occasion. Okay, he died of a single fatality crash. Fatal 就是致命的. Some incident, in which case this is a crash, a fatal incident where there was one person who died in this incident. It's called a single fatality crash. And he was piloting his recently purchased light plane. So it's a small airplane. And he was quite famous, but he worked terribly hard in order to become so famous. When he was hardly ever known, he would have a record, and he would stash his cars with hundreds of them and drive all around the country and stop by a radio station and go in and give one to that radio station and say, please play this song. That's how he became famous. It's a very hardworking person. And this is about one morning he listened to the radio and he thought about his old family home in the country, and he decided to go back there. So it's a very nice song to hear. Yeah, it's lovely. And here I have a poem by Tang Dynasty poet whose name is He Zhizhang. So it's and a casual on this not particular monumental occasion, I wrote this poem when I was returning to my home country. A casual note. 少小离家老大回，乡音无改鬓毛衰. We would pronounce it as 催. 儿童相见不相识，笑问客从何处来. It's got 4 lines, which we would call it a quatrain, which means a poem with 4 lines. Qua means 4, quatrain. I left my home when I was little, and now I return to my home when I'm really old. According to history, he was more than 80 years old when he finally returned. That's the story of many, many Chinese scholars. They would go to take an imperial exam and be on the final list, either the top one or second or third, and so on. And then they would be assigned to a post, maybe in the capital or maybe in a large province, which most of the time are quite prosperous, while his home was in the remote countryside. And so they would go from position to position and hardly ever travel home because transportation was not easy at that time. So as he was approaching his hometown, he was speaking in the dialect that other people were speaking. So his whatever he was speaking was not changed. However, his look was totally different. Even though there were some people there who knew him before, would not recognize him because his hair was white. He was over 80 years old, and he was old and not as strong as before. And there were kids on the street or in the town who came across him, and they did not recognize him because he was so old. The children were not born when he was at home. So they could not tell who he was. And they laughed and asked this guest, "Where did you come from? You must be people from some other places that came to our town for some reason." And they just jokingly asked him where he came from while he was only returning to his own home. Okay, so this is a very, very basic, simple poem, but it's just has a ring to many people because people like us, we left our hometown for years or even decades. And when we go home, we would not know anyone there and they would not know us. So this feeling has such a resonance that we just love to read it when we get older. Okay. Here we have this comment is about this poem. It was written in the year 744 when the poet was over 80 years old and he left his home more than 50 years ago. And when he returned to his hometown, he remembered things in the past and he looked at his children and he listened to people speaking in the same dialect as he once knew, but the people are mutually, they could not recognize each other because they've never met probably, even though, well, maybe a few of them knew him before. And he has this tumultuous feelings, this surging love and the sadness, and it's very emotional, but it's a very simple one. And as to this person, he lived from 659 to 744. When he was young, he was well known for his literary expertise, and he passed the imperial examination in the year 695, which is 34, maybe 36 years old when he was 30 some years old. And that's probably when he left his hometown and was everywhere else other than his hometown. And we do not know a lot about him, but he is very easygoing and loved to talk and loved to drink. And when he was older, he met the young Li Bai, who was an upstart poet that wrote brilliantly. And He Zhizhang got to read and meet this young poet. And he said to Li Bai that you are some fairy or immortal god that was banished from sky and now live around us. Your talent is just not normal, not our like our mortal person. From then on, people call Li Bai Shi Xian, which means he was a god of poetry or something like that. Okay, and this person is very good at calligraphy. He could write very good 草书, which is a cursive writing, and Li Shu, which is a scholar or scribe type of a very square writing. And his poems are very refreshing and unusual. And they're 全唐诗, we just mentioned 全唐诗 collection, complete collection or anthology of Tang Dynasty poems. They selected 19 of his poems. And one of them I found is this one because I had difficulty finding others. And this one is pretty nice. It's also very simple. It's a poem about willow tree. And it's a grand tradition in China that poets would write about things, whether they're living things or just an object like a teacups or something. They love to write about things. That it's called 咏物, huh? 咏物就是 a poem about an object. And this is about the willow tree. 碧玉妆成一树高，万条垂下绿丝绦。不知细叶谁裁出？二月春风似剪刀。He first mentioned how beautiful this tree is. It's like a tree totally decorated in green or blue jade. Such a tall tree, beautiful tree, and decorated with jade. You could see 10,000 branches hanging down that look like green silk ribbons. I wonder who designed and cut their leaves so slender and long, and they wave in the wind, in the breeze, in the second month, which is like in March. When they move like this, they look like scissors. And probably he also meant the air is so chilling that you feel the scissors cutting you. So this is a very nice poem, but that's the only other one I could find. I could have gone to 全唐诗. Actually, I did twice trying that, but they just would not take me to this person. So some other time I may be able to find other poems. Here I want to talk about 3 presidents who skipped successors' inauguration because our last president just skipped town. I heard it was early this morning. He took the helicopter and went to take the airplane and went home to Florida. But there were 3 before him, and there were actually 4, but one of them, not because he was angry and bitter, so we're not going to talk about him. His name is Martin Van Buren. And the other 3 all were bitter and angry, and they decided, no, I'm not going to attend this wonderful inauguration party because I feel so bad. And they are John Adams and John Quincy Adams, who was his son. Isn't that weird? 28 years later, the son also refused to go to the next inauguration. And the last one was Andrew Johnson in 1869. The good news is each one of them, after they skipped town and not going to this successor's inauguration, it brought in a new administration that just flourished. the next president all were re-elected and had a wonderful administration. So we expect to see Biden having a wonderful new administration as well. By the time he is re-elected, he'll be really, really old. He is already the oldest president-elect in history. So if he is re-elected, that's even 4 years longer than now, okay? So this one is the first one, John Adams. He was one of the very early ones, probably the second, I'm not quite sure. The first one was, George Washington, John Adams, and there were a group of them. We call them founding fathers, including the next one, Thomas Jefferson. They were all together working on this project of independence, but they were fighting among themselves. The John Adams was born in 1735, and he may be a little younger than George Washington, and he died in 1826 before his son. Oh, okay. His son became president in 1824. Okay, so he died 2 years after his son became president. And in 1801, I wanted to find out what happened because there's Hamilton in this whole story, but it's too long for me to go through. I'm not going to go through this. After I did all these, I went and watched the musical Hamilton again. And in that Hamilton musical, it did not talk much about this John Adams, but he was quite active, having an instrumental role in putting Jefferson on the, I was going to say putting him on the throne, but it's not the throne. Jefferson became the president mostly because Hamilton was helping him. Hamilton was in the other party, the Federalist Party, but he did not like his own party. So he helped Jefferson to be elected, and John Adams lost the race. So at that time, John Adams was a president and Jefferson was vice president. At that time, the person who won the most vote would be the president, while the next person garnering the second highest vote would be the vice president. That's why Jefferson was John Adams' vice president. But after 4 years, John Adams wanted to be re-elected, and Jefferson wanted to take over the seat. So they had a very bitter fight. It became very malicious, the throwing insults to each other. It was very unpleasant. And you could see that when the electoral votes were counted, Jefferson and Aaron Burr both got 73 votes, while Adams came in third. He was not eligible for the so-called runoff. However, this was not a runoff because there was not a second casting of ballot. It's just that all these people in the electoral college, they are going to vote again. This time they could only vote for the first or second. So it's sort of a runoff, but not a complete re-election. So they're in the electoral college, they had a casting of votes, and it took 36 votes for 36 ballots for them to reach the conclusion that Jefferson won while Aaron Burr lost. That's quite monumental, I would say. 36 ballots. Finally, Jefferson got 10 votes and Aaron Burr got 4 votes and 2 states abstained. How they voted was that each state having so many electoral votes, in this runoff could only vote as one block for one side or the other. So it's easier to reach a majority. However, it took them 36 times to reach the results. That's quite interesting to me. So that's it. Yeah, I should delete that one. I put that over. Okay. John Adams was very sad because his son died in November, and this inauguration took place on March 4th while he was not able to go home. His wife, Abigail, went home when his son died at home. So he was left in the Capitol for so many months. And he finally, on the last day, he decided, no, I'm going to skip this inauguration. And he went. So the next one was his son, 28 years later. And his name is John Quincy Adams. And at that time, in 1824, John Quincy Adams became the president, and Andrew Jackson won the next, I'm sorry. Then in 1828, yeah, there was his John Quincy Adams re-election, and there's Andrew Jackson, who already won the most popular votes and the most electoral votes, but he did not reach majority. He did not reach 50% in both the popular vote and the electoral vote. So they had to do something about it. So there's a third or fourth person, Henry Clay. His electors switched sides and voted that and the switch side. Okay, and Adams became the president in 1824. We're talking about 1824. And 4 years later, this Jackson, I'm sorry, who was that? Andrew Jackson was again fighting against John Quincy Adams, and Jackson this time became the clear victor. So in 1828, even though it's still the two of them competing, but Jackson was a clear winner, so he became the winner, and Quincy Adams left the White House on the evening of March 3rd. You can see that the inauguration was taking place on different dates then as now. We are right now January 20th, while in the past, at least once or more than once, it was on March 4th. After that, John Quincy Adams had no hope because the next president was doing very well, and the suffrage was expanded tremendously. Almost all the white men could vote in their next election. So a lot of people voted Jackson in his re-election campaign. So so he was a two-term president, and he established the age of Jackson, which is a pretty good run of 2 terms. And after them, after quite some time, into the next century, there was Andrew Johnson. Okay, so you have Andrew Johnson and you have Andrew Jackson. They were in different times, and this guy is the next one who skipped town. Well, he did not really skip town, but he refused to go to the inauguration. He was in the office working. Okay, so he was working, and he was not popular. He did not win the election, not even close. He was impeached by the House of Representatives. But the next one was a war hero from the Civil War, Ulysses Grant. He got the most votes, and Grant owed his very slim majority to nearly half. Lots of the people freed from the southern state voted for him. That's how he got the slim majority. So, okay, so that's the situation. And of course, Andrew Johnson was in the office. He did not go to the celebration, but Ulysses Grant went on to be a good president, and he won a second term as well. So we do hope Biden will win a second term or whatever. We don't know, okay? But it's a good omen for all the people to skip town and having a good run in the new administration and being reelected twice. I mean, being reelected, that's it. You were reelected once so that you can be a president twice. Okay, so that's it for today. And do we have any questions? Yeah, these things that are currently going on. Every time I read about something, I would say, "Oh, I can talk about this." Okay. Anyone else?
谢谢老师。
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes.